Hey there. Welcome to the Pelvis Project podcast. I'm Megan.
And I'm Roxy. We're two pelvic health experts brought together by passion for our careers, entrepreneurship, motherhood, and the desire for intentional relationships.
Join us in our mission to spread pelvic floor awareness and start conversations surrounding the truth behind genuine health, imperfect wellness, and joyfully navigating life. We are so glad you are here with us.
Let's start the conversation.
Good evening, Roxy.
Hello there.
How are we this evening?
We're great. How are you?
Good. We were just saying our new phrase is going to be, what's the best that can happen? You know, I was a good little reminder. By the way, we're going to have a conversation tonight about inner abdominal pressure in the core canister. But before that, I think that Roxy and I are both, everybody knows this. We both own businesses. We're both moms. Just life is lifing right now. And so that's where I think, there's just so many things that come up. And it's easy to worry and think ahead. And I saw this video clip from a movie, and I don't even remember what it was right before we hopped on here. And it was the whole there's two wolves and they're fighting, and one is like darkness and despair, and the other one is light and goodness, and which wolf wins? And it's like the daughter talking to her dad, and then he's like, I'm not going to do this. And she's like, okay, fine, walks away. And the answer is whichever one you feed. And so it's a good little reminder to feed your hope and light and not darkness and despair. So, Roxy, tell me something good.
Oh, boy. Let me think about this. It just was Halloween, and that was kind of fun.
Yeah.
I have fun helping my girls with their little costumes, and it was good this year. We had Fräulein Maria off of The Sound of Music.
Okay.
And so Isla dressed up, and she kept singing, I have confidence in sunshine. And she had her little ukulele case and was trying to do the jump and the dance, So that was cute.
That.
And then Hattie was Miss Rodeo America. And we found her a teeny tiny little blow up horse rider thing.
Oh my goodness.
And
you have
it
to send
was
me
classic.
pictures.
Oh my gosh. It was so funny. And she named her horse Ellie, and she just was rolling with it. Like she was playing the character, basically. And she told people, I'm not trick-or-treating. I have a rodeo tonight.
She did not. Oh, that's so cute. Did you dress Bram up?
Bram and Austin were a duo of Alan and Carlos off of The Hangover.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
It was good.
Did you dress up?
I didn't this year. Usually I do a spinoff of the girls, but this is the first year, something with them. This is the first year they didn't do something the same or themed.
Gotcha.
I'm not a huge costume person unless I have something I'm really excited about. So I don't just usually try to find something just because
Sure. Absolutely. We actually didn't do Halloween this year. Not for any particular reason other than the fact that the kids had fall break, and we took advantage of that and went to my aunt and uncle's lake house.
Oh, fun.
So we on Halloween actually went and saw David at Sight and Sound.
Oh my gosh. Was it so good?
So good. And so then we got done and headed back, and I told Owen I'd get him some candy. But it was funny because at first he was like, I don't want to miss. And then he was like, yeah, I don't care. And then he was like, wait, I kind of want to. And by the time we got to the lake and we went to David and all the things, he forgot all about it. So we had a great time. And then the next day on November 1st was the first night of the Christmas lights at Silver Dollar City. And so we needed to utilize our passes that we had one more time to make sure that we got the worth out of them. And so we went and saw the Christmas lights, and it was really nice because this year we didn't go until 4:30 or 5. And years past, we've gone early and spent the whole day, and we're just exhausted and kind of got grumpy by the time the Christmas lights came on. And so it was just lovely, and it was cool outside, and honestly, not as crowded as I was expecting it to be. So it was good. it was a really good kind of like, I needed to have a few days away and sit out in the peace and quiet and in the sun. But man, coming back and then like starting back on Monday today was tough. And my nervous system was a bit in overdrive. So we're working on it. But anyway, let's jump into our topic tonight. Like I mentioned, we're going to talk about the abdominal canister and kind of inner abdominal pressure. And what brought this up is Roxy and I were discussing kind of like workshops and gym talks that we have done or are doing, that sort of thing. And so I was working on revamping a talk, and this kind of has come up. And I think it's really helpful information and kind of that moment where people can be like, oh, okay, like this is making a little bit more sense now with leaking and kind of how the pelvic floor works with a little like with some impact and how that all coordinates together. So I'll just jump right in and talk about what the core canister is. And then Roxy is going to tell us a little bit about the main function. The abdominal canister is a cylinder-shaped core system made up of, at the top is the diaphragm, at the bottom is the pelvic floor muscles. The front and sides are your deep abdominals, so your transverse abdominis and your obliques on the sides. And then on the back are your multifidi muscles and deep spinal stabilizers. So it's this whole canister. And often when we are educating people about breath work, we talk about this canister and we talk about how when the diaphragm drops, when you take a breath in, diaphragm drops, pelvic floor lengthens with that and pressure moves down. And then as you exhale, pelvic floor comes up, diaphragm comes back up. And so this is a pretty powerful and important system. And we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. So if you have that kind of mental image in your picture of just like a can or a canister, like Megan said, you have diaphragms and like core abdominals all on the sides and then pelvic floor on the bottom. And so the primary job then of this canister is to regulate and control the intra-abdominal pressure. And that sounds like a lot of big words, but intra-abdominal pressure is just the pressure that's within that canister. And so we think about, sometimes I think as with the pelvic floor work, we think about how strong that exterior piece is, right? And so we definitely want the canister to have good integrity. We want this whole core system to be strong, but we can also work on dysfunction, or we can help optimize the system by managing the contents inside of that canister. Pressure isn't a bad thing. It's just too much is a bad thing. And so we want the right amount of pressure. And so that the body, it can maintain stability. We can have better support around the spine and through the pelvis. And then also it helps generate power for movement. We don't want it all or nothing. We got to find that sweet spot. And that can be a little bit different for everybody based on the integrity of that canister. That is basically the main function, is that it's a big support piece. And it also contributes to, I kind of hinted at spinal stability. We also want good intra-abdominal pressure for that stability because that also helps with balance and posture. Thinking about even just the organs within there, the pelvic organ support, and even like not just pelvic organ support, but digestion, things like that too. And then efficiency with breathing mechanics. And then when we're really talking about like higher level people or athletes, we are utilizing this intra-abdominal pressure for a force transfer, basically like thinking about jumping, lifting, things like that, and transferring force throughout the body.
Yep. We need to be able to have a different level of which we are utilizing our intra-abdominal pressure, because sometimes we need to be like really rigid for things. Like it's just it's a really awesome system, and you can learn to use it to your advantage. And then also, inadvertently not understanding it can be used to a disadvantage if we're just simply, like Roxy mentioned, kind of over pressurizing the system of what that can tolerate. So let's talk a little bit about how it works. So kind of especially with impact. So we're talking breath plus pressure plus pelvic floor coordination here. Okay. So on an inhale, the diaphragm moves down, pressure increases in the abdomen. The pelvic floor responds by lengthening slightly to absorb the pressure. So that's what we talked about, is when you take a good breath in, belly expands, diaphragm drops, pelvic floor lengthens, you have this increase in pressure in your abdomen. Okay. And so that the lengthening slightly to absorb the pressure. Okay. So that happens. This sets a healthy baseline for the load that's about ready to happen. So the second part is when you exhale and engage, which is the impact phase, the diaphragm rises, the pelvic floor recoils upward, and the deep abdominal muscles gently activate. So that's why when you take a good breath in, abdomen rises. As you exhale, abdomen falls, and those deep abdominal muscles help get that air out. And often people don't take a breath in correctly. So we could do a little bit of an exercise. Obviously, if you're a provider listening to this, you're going to know this. If this is just like everyday people, if you like pretend like you have a balloon and you get ready to go blow up, like pretend like you're getting ready to blow up a balloon, check yourself. And if you just like took a breath in and your chest rose and your abdomen sunk in, you're doing it incorrectly. And therefore, reach out to us and come see us. We'll fix it for you. You will fix it. We will guide you. But so anyway, so that step 2, again, remember we exhale, engage, the diaphragm rises, pelvic floor recoils upward, the deep abdominals gently activate. So this creates a lift and tension that stabilizes the trunk and supports impact. Because now we have to have the trunk supported correctly. And this is where posture and everything becomes such an important piece as well, because if we're all hunched over, now we have this core canister that has not an optimal system, if you will, just because of the mere fact that we are not in a proper position to manage all that pressure. Okay. So during impact and activities, so running, jumping, lifting, coughing, the ground reaction force travels up through the body. Okay. The pelvic floor and core need to meet that force with timed tension. And so a coordinated exhale or brace helps manage pressure so it doesn't dump downward onto the pelvic floor. So that's where that coordination piece comes in, the proper timing, which is very important when we're doing these impact activities. So remember, we have this lengthening that happens, and then we have almost like a recoil that happens, which is a really cool the way. And Roxy's going to talk about why this matters for impact next. But that's where when we're doing a pelvic floor assessment and we are assessing not only your strength and your, like when you take a breath, can we feel it in your pelvic floor? But this coordination piece, kind of this, can you contract and relax rather quickly? Or is it kind of this cogwheel? Or because you've got to be able to work into the strength and the length that you have in order for that coordination to show up the way that it needs to, if that makes sense. So tell us a little bit about why this matters, Rox.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think we can really think about it for impact, but I would encourage anyone who's listening, even if you're not like doing jumping jacks or running or things like that, think about like you're coughing or you're lifting or you're laughing. That's going to apply the same here. But you want to think about like if this system fires well, then the core and the pelvic floor are going to absorb and transfer this force efficiently. So when you cough or when you jump, we need that ability and that coordination and that timing so that the core and the pelvic floor absorb the shock. And it's not just a blunt force that hits the walls of the abdomen and the pelvic floor. We need them to lengthen and absorb kind of like a trampoline.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because then we have less leak risk. We have less back and pelvic pain, better power output, not input. And thinking about even going back to that canister, you think about when the pressure exceeds, if you have a can of pop and the pressure inside that can of pop exceeds the integrity of the can itself, then we have an explosion, right? That pop explodes out. And that's what happens when we have leakage. And that, when we jump or when we run or, for less active people, for when you cough or laugh, it's all a spectrum there. So we have that leaking or jumping. We also can see things like pelvic heaviness or prolapse symptoms. That's when the body recognizes that the pelvic floor a lot of times is that area of weakness. There's holes in it, right? We have a urethra. We have if we're women, we have vaginal opening. All of us have rectal, like an anorectal opening there. And so that's going to cause an area of weakness. And so when that pressure exceeds the canister, that's the area that's going to struggle the most to contain that. That's why we have that compromise there. And then we also are going to see same compromise potentially, depending on the person, right? Of doming or coning and or back pain from pressure mismanagement. And so again, it's going to look, where is the area of weakness? Is it along that midline of the abdominals where we just talked about diastasis a couple episodes ago? And so if the pressure is greater, it's going to find that area of weakness, whether that's your midline of your abdominals, whether that's into your back, your spine, and into some of those nerve roots like that pinches really hard, or if it's down on the pelvic floor, and we have to relieve some of that pressure somehow. And that's when the body will relieve it by exiting urine, exiting gas, or pushing tissue closer to that opening and having that pressure, having that dome come out. Anytime those are happening, it's just an attempt for the body to relieve pressure out of that canister, out of that core system.
I like to kind of tell people that, especially if we do have a pretty severe diastasis after birth, and there is, we've done an episode on this before. I can't remember which one, so you can go back and listen to it. But we're not really concerned. It's old ways of looking at DR, but we're talking very severe and probably is going to need some surgical intervention. Often with that, when someone is taking and working on breath work, the air is going to want to go the path of least resistance. And so sometimes when we're working on this, we have to have people honestly put a hand on their abdomen or a pillow to kind of help block a little bit when you take a breath in as you're working to work on that retraining the canister and everything, because otherwise, all of it is going to want to go right out the front of the abdomen. And so therefore, then we have this pressure system that's not necessarily functioning correctly. So it's really cool to be able to kind of go in and see where the areas need to be corrected or guided in another way. And so when we're working with interabdominal pressure, when it comes to your pelvic floor, if you are somebody who is dealing with pelvic floor tension and we can't even access your ability to lengthen, then you can see where now, if we have pressure coming down and the pelvic floor is like, well, I'm not going to move, this trampoline system is now not quite right. It's like we have a frozen trampoline, and we all know what that might be like when you jump on a frozen trampoline.
Yeah, and at that point, I a lot of times tell patients, at that point, it's a mathematical equation. It's whether the strength of your pelvic floor is greater than the amount of pressure coming down. And the only way that we can advantage that is to add that shock absorption. That allows that area to withstand so much more pressure than how strong it is at rest, basically,
Right.
or in static. If we can add some boing to that, then that advantages us. And we need, if there's pelvic floor dysfunction happening or core compromise, right? We need every advantage that we can. And so being mindful of our intra-abdominal pressure management is a huge, huge strategy that we can use to our advantage. And for longevity, of just thinking long-term, if struggling with prolapse now, you're probably going to have some struggles with it the rest of your life, in a sense. Not that you're going to be dysfunctional the whole time, but just something you have to manage and be aware of.
Keep in mind
be
that it's
mindful
there.
of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so just thinking about some of these skills are just become habits in a really good way.
Yep. And with that too, we're talking the, inter-abdominal pressure and often kind of this top-down approach, but there's, we could do a whole nother episode on the force reactions of everything coming up from the ground and up through the foot, and how we need to, if we jump and land, how you can almost hear people differences on the way they land on the ground. That's a whole nother talk. But anyway, so hopefully this is helpful to you. And again, this is where having an assessment by a trained pelvic floor physical therapist or occupational therapist is really great, because we're going to be able to assess this internally so that we know exactly how this coordination is going. Because I will tell you, like in my early days when I used to, when I was first introduced into like women's health or pelvic health, I was trained, I wasn't trained internally. And there's just so much that, yes, can you provide very helpful things? Absolutely. But that full assessment is really powerful. So Hopefully, this episode was helpful to understand a little bit more about the core canister, inner abdominal pressure, how that works with your pelvic floor, how the pelvic floor lengthens, recoils, and provides you to have a coordinated movement. And if you have questions on this, definitely send us a message on Instagram. That's really the main way to get a hold of us on the Pelvis Project, or individually at our accounts at Good Life Pelvic Health and at Kansas Pelvic Health. And until next time, we will keep this conversation going. Thank you so much for joining us this week on the Pelvis Project podcast. Help us continue the conversation by liking and sharing this episode with friends. And if you really want to do us a solid, leave us a review. If you'd like to follow us on social, check out the show notes for links. And remember, this week, take a deep breath and relax your pelvic floor.